we're going to be speaking about the challenges with mineral production, and in particular, the role that innovation and technology plays in addressing those challenges. My name is Shivani Torres. I'm with New Lab. New Lab is a venture platform for critical technologies. Essentially, what we do is we accelerate the technologies that the world needs faster. And we're here today. We have 25 companies, incredible companies, at the International Exhibition area. So if you have time to walk over to that area and walk through, we're right there at the front. We'd love to be able to showcase the companies that we have with respect to exploration, with respect to mineral processing, with respect to traceability. So please come by our booth. I'm joined here by a great panel of guests. I've got Andre Figueroa from SR Capital. I've got Doug Morrison from SEMI. I've got Dustin Angelo from Novamera. And I've got Peter Bryant from Clario. I'm going to go ahead and let them introduce themselves, tell you a little bit about themselves. And the way this panel is going to go is we're going to start by talking about problems and challenges with mineral production for the first 10 minutes. And then we'll switch over into opportunities, opportunities globally to address these challenges, as well as opportunities specifically here in the kingdom. We'll save the last few minutes for Q&A. And with that, I'll pass it over to you, Andre.
Hello. Welcome. Thanks for coming. So my name is Andre. I have about 20 years of experience in mining, 18 years with Vale, where I was strategy, investor relations, sales, and I recently joined the SAR.
Excellent. Doug.
Good afternoon. My name is Doug Morrison. I've spent the last 40 years in the mining industry, 15 years in production in the Canadian mines in Sudbury, Ontario for nickel and copper, another 15 years as a consultant, and now the last 12 years back in Sudbury doing innovation in ore production, but also in tailings and waste management.
Good afternoon. My name is Dustin Angelo. I'm a co-founder and CEO of Novamera. And I've got about 20 years of mining experience. At Novamera, what we're doing is we've helped mining companies unlock new mining opportunities. So what does that mean? Well, we've developed data-driven hardware and software solutions that enable mining companies to surgically extract mineral deposits. So precision mining, using downhole sensors and drilling equipment. So we're able to help them unlock deposits that have been stranded because they're not economic to use conventional mining methods. So we're able to help mining companies add more production, add more supply to the market, and we do that in all the data-driven technological way.
Yeah, hi, I'm Peter Bryant, board chair for Clario. So my background for the last 20 years, my firm has been designing activating innovation systems for the mining industry, oil and gas, and the energy sector globally. Myself, I sit on the boards of several startups around the US where I'm based, as well as on 2 venture fund boards. Prior to that, I've spent actually 25 years in the enterprise software industry, a student of innovation across sectors, and been a vocal voice for the last 20 years around mining innovation and some of the headwinds that we need to overcome. So look forward to this. Yep.
Great. So let's get started with you, Dustin. In your perspective, what challenges do you see with mineral production?
Oh, well, I don't think we have enough time for all that, but you know, with mineral production these days, I mean, there's a lot of issues around you know, permitting and license to operate. There's issues around finding more metals and minerals. The ability to find that low-hanging fruit anymore is pretty much gone. And so you're getting lower grades as well. So there's a lot of things that are influencing either their internal or externalities to the mining industry that's impeding the ability to meet supply. I mean, we all know that there's a massive amount of critical minerals and metals that we need over the coming decades to meet a lot of these audacious goals out there. And it's going to be really difficult because of all these different issues that are happening that are making it very hard for mining companies, conventional mining, right, to be able to meet these supply demands.
Got it. And Doug, I know that you have a perspective. What role does innovation play in addressing these challenges? And can you speak more about the function of SEMI?
Well, the fundamental problem is the fact that innovation is not playing a role in the way ore is produced. I was involved in my early career in the early 80s when we made the transition from very manually intensive selective mining methods with very small handheld drills, and we changed over now to the equipment that we have now, which are large ITH machines, LHDs, large trucks, etc. That transition was made by 1985. That technology platform has not changed in the last 40 years. There is no other sector in the economy that is using a technology platform that is 40 years old. Simple fact. And the same fact exists for the tailings and waste management practices that we have today, have been in place for 40 years. Waste management for all of us, for every sector of the economy, has changed dramatically as we now divert our waste, our metal, our plastic, etc. The waste management practices of the industry have not changed one iota in 40 years. Tailings goes in one pipe from the mill to the tailings pond, and no other change has happened. No other industry could get away with this in the modern era, and this is the crunch that we're all confronting now. So we have to change our production practices, and we have to change our waste management practices. Fact.
You've also mentioned to me in the past that really the big issue is it's not that there isn't innovation, it's that there's not adoption. So
That's
can
right.
you speak a little bit to why the industry hasn't changed, why we don't see?
Well, yes, that's absolutely true. There is lots of innovation. We're actually funding 50 companies right now with $160 million of innovation across Canada, addressing several of these issues. The problem is adoption by, certainly not by the large major mining corporations. You have a better chance with the mid-tier companies, but the best chance of all is actually with the smallest mining companies, because they're the hungriest to improve their business. The larger corporations are more resistant to change, and those are just the facts of life. And so our dilemma is, how do we move the creation that is the creative solutions that are developed in small to medium-sized enterprises in the economy, and have those scale up to have an impact on the overall production system. So there are lots of innovations that are happening, but they tend to die at the very final stage of what we call TRL 7, 8, 9, because they can't become commercially viable. So our little MICA network, Mining Innovation Commercialization Accelerator, is funding those small companies to get to the other side so that they actually have a commercially viable service or product that the industry can adopt and use to improve its business.
Yeah.
And what we discovered 35 years ago is, when we were making the mining companies much safer, many of my bosses at the time said, well, we can't really afford all this safety stuff. This is going to put us out of business. That was not true. What we discovered by improving the safety conditions in our mines is safer mines are actually better businesses.
Yeah.
It's a more disciplined business, and your business improves when you improve the quality of the work that gets done.
I want to bring Andre and Peter into this discussion, because you've mentioned that you have these technologies that maybe go from TRL 1 to TRL 7, but ultimately to get to commercial scale, there's a lot of support that needs to be put around these companies. Support in the form of capital to ultimately drive adoption, as well as the mining houses seeing this technology being applied at scale so they can understand how this technology will fit into their production. Andre, do you have some comments here?
Yeah. Just this morning, I saw the market cap of the largest 10 mining companies in the world. It's around $750 billion. Only Apple is $3.5 trillion.
Yeah.
Tesla is $1.3 trillion. When you look at Tesla, when you look at Apple, they need all these minerals and metals that are being produced by mining companies. But somehow the market is not really in favor of the mining. And to Doug's point, in the last years, there's so much attention paid to health and safety, to tailings management. But there is an issue that sometimes we forget. We like to talk a lot about copper and nickel because they are related to energy transition, but we forget about iron ore. When you look at the steel business, 8 to 9% of all CO2 emissions come from the steel business. So the word decarbonization, it's as relevant as any transition world, let's say. And iron ore and high-grade iron ore is key for that. When you look at the mine sites, the grade is depleting. The highest the grade of iron ore, the lowest the consumption, the emission of CO2. So companies like SR, which I'm working with now, it's investing alone $2 billion in the US to produce the highest grade form of iron ore. But we need more. And this, the industry, I think needs, as Doug mentioned, needs more adoption, maybe it needs more funding, more favored regulations. Of course, it has to do its part as well, but I think it's a collective effort, and I think FMF and all the leaders are here. The voice has to be heard about how to help mining improve and adopt and innovate as fast as we need.
Thank you. Peter, I want to go to you.
Sure. Yeah, okay, I'll just jump in, shall I?
Right in,
yeah.
jump right in.
So I'd actually like to frame how I think about innovation and the challenges. So first, I think if we look at existing mining, and this is building off everyone else's comments, fundamentally how we mine today is too energy, water, and waste intensive. It is absolutely unsustainable. So one innovation challenge is within the existing mining methods, how do we reduce that intensity dramatically? So that's one. Two is then for new deposits, including brownfields, how do we come up with entire new methods of mining, like what Nova Mera is doing, that's less waste, less water, less energy, because tailing dams, nobody wants a tailing dam anywhere near them in a community, honestly don't, and even dry tailings. So we fundamentally have to change as an industry, but the outlook is not positive in my view, because to enable these kind of innovations, you just need to look at any other sector. It requires vast pools of venture capital. We lack venture capital, particularly in the BC growth rounds. Adoption's a problem. That sends a signal back to the venture community that the total addressable market of mining is not that large. And my last point is that's why I would encourage startups to rethink business models. Mere licensing or selling of tech is not a fundamentally scalable business model that's going to attract investors. So you see with Lilac, which is a DLE, direct lithium extraction, I'm on their board, or Cobalt, Ver.ai, they are all tapping into royalty streams from the minerals that they help extract. That drives the revenue growth. It's almost like a SaaS model. So you have an annuity that grows with production. I think every company needs to adopt a variation of that to be actually meaningful. But if we don't get venture capital in, and the mining industry needs to lean into this, we're just going to end up with all these small startups as we have for the last few decades, and we're not going to change what fundamentally needs to change.
I want to switch gears a bit now. We set the stage, we talked about the context. We know that innovation is maybe happening, but there really aren't the conditions to create true innovation. There's not patient capital, it's not well funded all the way through the stages of idea to commercialization. And ultimately, there is this element of circularity, sustainability, and we need to be a little bit more creative around the business models that can really drive this ecosystem of innovation and ultimately the ability to produce and extract more minerals. Yeah. So I want to kick it back to the panel and ask, what opportunity does the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the Superior region, represent to address some of these challenges that we've discussed? And Peter, I'll kick it back to you to get started.
I appreciate it. Well, I've been involved with FMS since its inception and worked closely with the Kingdom and the government. And I think Minister Bandar and Vice Minister Khalid often talk about modern mining. And I think if they can lean into the innovation centers and invest the capital, similar to what they've done in the oil and gas industry, with key collaborations with oil service companies and the Western oil majors, then we may have a shot at this, because they could maybe inject the necessary capital and collaboration efforts, but that's still playing out, if you like. So I think they have a key role to play, and hopefully 2025 years, the year of action, which is what this is about. Yeah. So I think they have a key role to play to achieve their ambition.
Thank you. Dustin, representing the startup's perspective here, can you share a little bit with the audience about the opportunity that you see for companies like yours to do business in the kingdom? And what do you want to say to the audience about how they can engage you, a company like yours, in ultimately addressing the challenges that we've discussed?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a great opportunity for a company like ours. I mean, this, the idea of driving more innovation, I get the sense in Saudi Arabia that there's a real desire to be innovative and be on the leading edge and cutting edge. Also, get the sense too that it's longer term patient capital. We talked about this before. Like we need to be able to, especially as a startup, you need a lot more time. Hard tech, deep tech, it takes a lot more time to create the technology, to find the markets, to get your product market fit, to figure all those things out. So you need environments where you can do that. And frankly, with Saudi Arabia, the opportunity to be able to, it's almost like a clean slate. There's no legacy issues from decades and decades of way things were done in the Western world in terms of mining. So, the opportunity to really embrace innovation, and make that sort of a leading characteristic in driving, investment and desire to be here. For us, that's what we need. We need folks that want to invest and take the chance earlier on in technology and be more patient capital so that we can figure all these things out. We can figure out a better system that we're putting together. We can figure out the product market fit. All these things, they take time, and we need places that are able and willing to do that.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
I'll say a little bit about New Lab. So I mentioned before we're a venture platform, but ultimately our model is to structure P3, so private-public partnerships in which we're engaging industry and government to create the conditions locally that can drive innovation from ideation all the way through commercialization. Doug, CEMI, the Center for Mining and Excellence in Canada, has an accelerator, MICA, which ultimately funded Novamera. And can you speak a little bit about the importance of having industry and government at the table to create the conditions to drive innovation forward?
Well, it really is. It's the government in Canada that promoted the idea of moving the innovation agenda forward faster. The problem is that as you get stuck in what's called the valley of death when you're developing a business, the longer you stay there, the more likely you are not to be successful. The biggest single advantage that exists in the kingdom, I believe, is that you're not constrained by the paradigms of the past. It's the mindset that has existed for the last 20, 30 years in the conventional mining industry. The fact is, if you look at gold, copper, and nickel, those three commodities are mined at 1% grade, 2% grade, 3% grade. That means at least 97% of all the material excavated to produce gold, copper, and nickel is classified as waste. It is not waste. It is also a commodity. It is not a commodity that a gold mining company, copper mining company, or nickel mining company is interested in processing into a viable commodity. But it is a resource. We have to move away from the idea of using 1% of the resource and leaving the other 97%, especially leaving it in a highly toxic pond of waste, which is no longer desirable to even some of the poorest communities in the world. That is the fundamental shift that has to take place, and it's a fundamental shift in business thinking. The fact is, the demand for metals is increasing because of the demand for electrification. You cannot make electrification be successful if the price of copper goes higher. The price of copper right now means that electric technologies are more expensive than fossil fuel technologies. You cannot defeat carbon with more expensive metals. So executives who say we can have more investment and more mines if we have higher prices, that's a myopic point of view. Every business has two halves. One is the price that you get for your product, and the other half is the cost that you used to produce it. We never hear mining executives talking in any significant terms of reducing the cost of production. And that's because most have very little experience of the actual business itself. And so they have no idea how to reduce their cost of production because they're lawyers and accountants who have no knowledge of the actual process. Those of us who are technocrats understand what could be done.
Yeah.
But executives don't take that advice, and you cannot say if we have higher prices, we'll produce more copper. Higher priced copper loses to lower price fossil fuels.
Great. I'm going to stop you there just so we have time. So I think it's very important to change the dialogue around mining. And Andre, you and I we were talking about the narrative around mining. You've got a whole generation of people that love the devices, the environments in which they interact with, which are powered by minerals, but at the same time feel very negatively towards the concept of the mining industry. Can you leave us with this thought before we go into Q&A?
Yeah, I was talking to her about my daughters, right? They love iPhones, they love electric cars, but they hate mining, right? They have been exposed to things that happened in the past. Although the industry has changed a lot, and I've seen it from inside, there is still maybe a lack of communications, right? And all these issues with tailings disposal, with affecting communities, has left the impression that mine is not a good place to be, which is the opposite, right? Mine is driving innovation. Mine is driving the electric revolution. Okay, if we have an iPhone, it's because of mining, right? So I think there is from one hand, we need the mining business, which, for example, like I mentioned aside, investing in something that's beneficial to the world. The product they will produce, combined with the investment they're making here in Saudi Arabia, emits 50% less carbon than a blast furnace in China or in Brazil. So this is a real contribution to the world, but people don't know that. And as I mentioned before, if you combine all the 10 mining companies' market cap, it's half of Tesla. How come, right? So, I mean, there's a lot to advance, but there's a lot of understanding about what mining does and the benefits of mining to society in general.
Thank you. All right, I think we have 4 minutes for questions. I believe they're going to pass around the microphone. Does anyone have a question that they want to throw out to this panel? A question around challenges facing mineral production, or a question about... We have it's coming. Sorry, I snapped. Right here, right here.
Front row.
Front row.
Front row.
Front row.
Front row.
This gentleman
First.
here.
First, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. So my question is, there is two parts. The first part is you talk about the reluctance of the big players to adopt to be innovative. And we know usually they are the one who should lead the industry to change the mining method. So from your point of view, what can trigger this resistance from the big player? Is it because of the mining industry is not so economically bankable, or what can explain this one? My second question is for the panel. I mean, we can see actually the trend of the demand of the metals for the energy transition is very high. The new deposits, most likely the trend will be a low grade. It's no more maybe the 1%. The trend will be 0.4, 0.5, 0.6, and we are going to produce much more waste. With the new requirement of ESG, how can you see the industry going forward to combine the low-grade mining with the new additional requirement for the ESG?
I'll just jump in there
Yeah,
quickly.
go ahead, Peter.
One is, if you look at every other industry that's been disrupted, like in Nova Mirror, the existing incumbents are never the people that adopt it. Every industry, our lessons are new players enter the industry, do the disruption, and then the big players acquire them. Look at unconventional oil and gas. The major oil companies didn't believe it would work. Okay, and unconventional gas was unleashed by a bunch of new companies that have now been rolled up and are significant. And your second point, sorry, what was the second question? That was?
ESG.
ESG. I think one of the grand innovation challenges, because green premiums are a dream, is how can we responsibly extract and process at the lowest possible price? And we're nowhere near that, because ESG requirements lay on more cost. And the market doesn't want green premiums, they're not going to pay. So that's a huge challenge.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
I think we have time for one more question.
Quiet.
Thank you. How are you? Really great panel discussion. I apologize, I forgot your name, gentleman
No.
in the middle, but a lot what you were
Everybody
saying
does.
was resonating with me. And early on in my mining career, back in 2015, I was part of a company called BHP and led a team called Precision Mining. And a lot of the focus of our team was to, one, reduce C1 cost, and seeing the challenges that were there, we started focusing on change management. So I would love to know from you, in your experience, I mean, you were around in the 80s, what do you think is still going wrong? given that there was so much focus on reducing C1, so lowering our costs with technologies and surgically mining, in addition to a focus on change management to implement appropriately and holistically, what do you feel is still the big challenge given that we're putting so much money into it?
Okay,
Thank you.
so for most of my career, there was no such thing as change management. Management came in and said, we're doing this now, get started, and there was no assistance for any process to make that easier to adopt. So that's most of my experience with change management. There isn't any. And second of all, we do it particularly badly. We seem to be able to find ways to create disincentives for the workforce to change the way they do things. People will always want to continue to do what they've always done if you leave that alone. So for an executive to say, well, I'd like to try that out, but my operators are not asking for that. Your operators will never ask for that change because that's what operators do. They do the same thing every day and get paid, and they're very happy to do that. Executive management is supposed to be about improving your business. And you have to find the techniques that will work. Sometimes it's really, really simple. We had the all-electric mine in 1984, and they changed the bonus system for the men who were operating the machine and gave them less bonus for using the electric machines than they did for using the diesel machines. And what do you think happened? The productivity declined, they effectively sabotaged the transition, and that was a management decision. Do you think perhaps if they had given them a few more cents incentive to run the electric machines, they would have been tremendously successful in 1984? So we seem to continue to find ways to screw this up. And it means taking a direct focus on the human element in the change that has to happen. That's where the problem lies. There is an easier way to do that because in many operations, our highest cost is labor, and automation of the equipment systems is really the way of the future. Most young people today do not want to be driving a truck. They would like to be programming the machines to drive themselves. And that is the future of the industry. It also means because coding is agnostic to all ethnic diversity and gender diversity, it means that the industry no longer stays dominated by people that look like me versus the broader sweep of humanity.
And
Okay.
That's the
a
future.
very quick compliment, taking my
10 seconds.
experience
No,
from
go ahead.
50
Go ahead.
seconds, because we're already 5
Another
minutes.
reason that they focus on cost and volume is because every 3 months they have to report results. All these companies are listed either in New York or in London, and they are measured by the financial market on how they perform on volume, on cost, on margins. Okay, so if you have all this pressure to think short term, how come you're going to think so longer term? Okay, that's why maybe innovation gets delayed and pushed until a point where there's no way not to adopt. But that's probably one of the reasons you see this going forward. I was there in this events report, and I could see how people are frightened to report those numbers. And if they're not in line, your stock drops immediately. And then if you're a CEO, you're
Okay.
gone.
Well, so on that, in summary, it's about the human elements and designing the right incentives to encourage the right behaviors. And I want to thank our great panelists for this lively discussion and for the questions from the audience. Thank you all for taking the time on this panel, and look forward to speaking to you all after this event.
Thank you.
Thank you.